Firstly, I think I just wanted to say thank you to you and Ina for allowing me the opportunity to actually just share with your church, because not only is it an honor, but it's also very exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. Because whatever you teach here from the front is something that has the ability to impact people for a lifetime. So let me just start by saying the very first time that I got to use communion, I was frightful of it, fearful. I didn't understand it. I had nightmares about it, because in our church, when we grew up, you had to go to the front of the church, then sit at a table, and then the pastor would share a little word and then hand out the things, and this huge big cup would come past you, and as you were drinking of it, everybody's eyes was on you to just see how much of it you're going to take and if you were going to spill of it. So I was really frightful of that. So every time after that I heard of communion message being shared, I slipped out. And when Jacques asked me to come and share, I thought, but Lord, I don't really understand communion in the way that you intended. So you are going to have to give me a picture so that I can understand the full concept of what you are sharing. And the word picture that God gave me was actually on covenant, more specifically, marriage covenant. But if you really want to understand covenant in the way that God intended it, then I would refer you to go and look in the Bible at Noah's covenant that God shared with him in Genesis chapter 9, and then also Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, because that breaks out covenant a little bit more for you, to give you the true value of what covenant really is, because in today's life it was watered down a little bit. But then God took me to Exodus chapter 12, where he said to Moses the night before they left Egypt that they had to go take a lamb for every household, kill the lamb, and then apply the blood onto the doorposts and on the lintel of the door. And then they had to roast the meat in fire, and then they had to partake of the meat and of the unleavened bread in a specific way. And that was significant in a type and a shadow of how God provided for them when he led them out of Egypt. But the interesting part was is that when God passed through Egypt, everywhere the blood was applied, he passed over. That household was safe. They didn't suffer any lack. They didn't suffer any loss. But everybody else in Egypt that didn't have the blood applied suffered loss. So now you would ask, but what does that have anything to do with marriage and covenant and the Lord's table? Let's go to Mark chapter 26, and then I'll read from verse 26. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Verse 27, then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant." So in a new covenant, and in looking at what God did for us, Jesus was the perfect lamb that was slain for us so that we can now stand in a covenant relationship with him as the bride of Christ, right? So if you go to Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, it said, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." When Yaku and I were dating, we had some certain boundaries and limitations to our relationship. But the day that we got married, we entered into a marriage covenant. Likewise, also, the day that you choose Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you step into a new covenant with Jesus. Any other relationship that you will have outside of a marriage covenant will always be limited. Then if you read further in Genesis chapter 2, verse 25, it said, and they were both naked, the man and the wife, and were not ashamed. Okay, but still, what does that have to do with the Lord's Supper? What does it have to do with communion? Let me take for an example Jacques' relationship with Yaku. There's boundaries, there's limitations. We can go out, have something to eat, but Jacques doesn't get to share in the covenant with Yaku and myself. I'm the only one within the marriage covenant that can share intimately with my husband. Nobody else can. So when you partake of the communion, it's an intimate relationship between you and Jesus. You get to come boldly as the bride of Christ because God said when you accepted Him that you've become a new creation. Now, as a wife of Yaku, I'm no longer known by my maiden name, by my former past or my mistakes. Because when you enter into Jesus, God no longer sees you as separate from Jesus. He sees you as one. So, for me, that is covenant and communion now means that is a part where I get to be selfish, where I get to enjoy the full benefit of the covenant for me, what God did for me. Nobody else gets to share in what my relationship with God is going to be. It's special, it is unique, it is intimate, and He knows every part of you. And when He looks at you, He sees you holy, blameless, and redeemed. So today, when we partake of the communion, I want us to see it as that exchange, that I'm giving my old life to you and I'm receiving what you have for me in the new life, what you've freely provided for me as a bride of Christ. At first, I asked Jock to maybe just hand out the communion elements to us as part of the spiritual leader that He is to us. But I think maybe today we can come ourselves to the table and leave whatever hindrances that we have on the table and then take what Jesus paid for. In Psalm 105, verse 37, it says that He also brought them out with silver and gold, and there was none feeble among them. So today I also want you to see, because people only tend to think that the communion and what God did for us on the cross was only for salvation, but it is also for your healing. So if you are still hindered today by what your past have caused for you, illness, hindrances, diseases, illness, or whatever it might be, come and leave it today at the table, expecting to be fully set free, but also healed. When you partake of it, expect that you will walk here free from any ailment, without any hindrances or diseases. So we can come and partake of the Lord's Supper.